There are tons of guides out there to teach you how to play different characters correctly, but when the time comes to play ranked, only so much information can really help you buckle down and carry your team to victory. I've made these types of videos myself, and while they are great resources to learn characters and their potential, sometimes it's difficult to pull out the practical tips that win you games. So let's cut out the nonsense and learn what you really need to climb as Baptiste. Immortality Field is by far the most important cooldown to master as Baptiste, especially since you realistically only get one shot to get it right. There are so many different levels of difficulty to get right about Immortality Field though, and most players get the first one wrong. It is so important that you are putting Immortality Field behind corners so that it does not break. I don't care if a shield is blocking it because the shield will break, and the lamp will shortly after. Make it a point to create a habit of throwing the field around a corner, even in tense situations when you are panicking. Understand that in a Bap versus Bap matchup, the player that is forced to use lamp first will likely lose. So it is important that you don't use it when you don't need to, but how do you know when it is the right time to lamp? I ask myself a quick series of questions. How low are they? Can I heal them? How much danger are they in? A lot of players panic when they see the critical sign pop up on their main tank. Sometimes all you need to do though is invest your regen burst and heal through the damage. This situation will be more common the lower you go, as players will be less precise in their execution of kills. Because lamp is such an important ability to get right, it can be stressful, but do your best to break the situation down and think, especially when you look back at your gameplay in VOD reviews. But what if your teammate is shots away from death? Is that when you throw the disc of life? Not necessarily. Sometimes your teammate could be low, but not necessarily in any danger. For example, my Ryan could be very low, but maybe the enemy doesn't have the resources to finish him off. The situation is different when he has a full shield compared to a cracked shield as well, but at the end of the day, it all influences his danger level. What I'm getting at here is that Immortality Field is used to counter imminent danger towards your team in these scenarios, not just critical HP. While the critical symbol is a possible indicator that someone is approaching death, it is not definitive. Just like how a player could be really high SR, but it doesn't necessarily mean they are really good. It is a strong indicator, but there could be other variables that you aren't considering. On the flip side of the matchup, it is important to capitalize on an enemy Baptiste's mistake as well. If you have ammo and they don't, you can play much more aggressively with your team. It essentially gives your tanks a free ticket into the backline, especially a Reinhardt. Simply throw the ammo to the back of the enemy team and push through it so that you eventually end up in the radius. Let's talk about Baptiste's gun. No, the tip I'm going to give you isn't to do the heal nade double burst technique. It's a lot simpler than that, although that is still an important thing to learn given the right situations. Your grenades heal for 70 on impact and 50 on splash, so stop using it to heal single-digit points of damage in rotation. That is what your other support is for. It is insane how many players do this, even in high GM. By using your ammo early in rotation, you lose out on your maximum healing potential for one, but also the uptime you have when the fight actually starts to happen. For example, if you waste ammo in this rotation, you are left with around 6 shots compared to 10. This forces you to use Immortality Field early, allowing the enemy a free fight win in the Baptiste differential. In this situation, the loss might not even be a lamp mistake, but rather the way you set yourself up. So what can you do in the downtime of rotations and early fights? You can look to be more aggressive with your damage to pressure shields and force players off of specific angles. Don't underestimate your capabilities with Baptiste, and if you need practice, codes are always available to improve yourself. The last ability we will focus on is your ultimate window. Players are either too aggressive with this ability or way too passive. You definitely don't want to hold it forever, but you also don't want to be so quick to use it that you place it incorrectly. The most optimal use of window is at a 45-degree angle off of a corner as opposed to a straight line across a choke. This is because when placed correctly, the angled window actually allows more areas to be covered when firing through the ability compared to a choke where the enemy can just simply hide. But sometimes windowing your team isn't the right play, especially if the enemy is taking a bunch of angles or has a full gauge of defense matrix and Sigma grasp. Some games will force you to window selfishly, requiring you to focus up and execute some kills. In short, use the ability often and aggressively with your team, unless the enemy is taking angles with aggressive dive characters, in which you will either have to window extremely early or play to take an angle and force value into your opponent's face. Positioning is pretty simple as Baptiste. Play with your team and try to stack nearby as much as possible, allocating your healing utility to as many teammates as possible. If it is as easy as just rotating together and stacking though, there has to be a more difficult issue that requires more deliberate thought on Baptiste, right? correct. It is important to understand when it is time to get off Baptiste. Just because a character is considered broken doesn't mean they are going to be the most optimal in every situation. Maybe you just can't get enough done on the character and could carry harder with aggressive anti-nades on Ana. Or maybe the enemy is running a dive composition, forcing you to use your lamp on yourself instead of the most optimal situations, causing you to switch to a safer Brigitte pick. In my opinion, Baptiste is harder to climb with compared to Ana for most players because of this reason. Players in ladder make playing Bap harder as they aren't always going to lock characters like Rhine in every game. Players are locking Hog, Ball, Winston, and other tanks that are off on their own, and it isn't going to get any easier in Overwatch 2. Ana is more suited for the ladder situation, but that doesn't mean she is the most optimal for team play. Ladder isn't optimal. Just keep that in mind when learning the character. Before we close, let's rapid fire a few more tips that will help you in those niche situations ladder throws at you. Regen Burst is an ability that you don't want to waste on just yourself when you don't have to, especially in Overwatch 2. If you are in a situation where you aren't in any danger, don't use the ability. Instead, wait for when your team gets dynamited by Ashe, when you are weaving a reload through rotation, or when your backline is receiving pressure in Overwatch 2. Remember that the ability gives an instantaneous 100 healing in the new game to all of your teammates. When used correctly consistently, you have the ability to effectively give most of your team 300 HP every fight, which will definitely be a key to success when playing BAP in Overwatch 2. Exo Boots aren't just a fun little passive they gave to the character, it is an extremely useful tool to dodge shatters, ball slams, and traverse difficult vertical terrain, so much so that Baptiste actually pushes the cart on some points the game offers because he can get back into the fight so easily compared to other characters. Just make sure you aren't max height jumping into Widowmaker, it is really easy to hit. Remember that if you are struggling to hit your shots, codes are always available to you to improve and get that little bit of extra value needed to possibly carry more games on the character. More resources are linked in the description to aid you in your understanding of Baptiste and Overwatch both in the present and future. The tools are in your hands to keep your team alive and kicking as Baptiste, but it is up to you to use them. You've already made it to this video, so the passion is clearly there, just get after it and get on the grind. Thank you all so much for watching, but until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.